Hello loves! Welcome back to the channel where we discuss all things embodiment, abundance, and radiance. I'm so excited to be officially kicking off this community and starting the conversation as well. So for starters here, I thought we should delve into what I mean exactly when I use the word radiance. So this is definitely something you're going to hear a lot on this channel. It's one of those common themes. But I do think the definition of words is very important. And I want to make sure that we're all starting on the same page. So when you think of a woman who's radiant, let's just have all of us think of a woman who's radiant, and this radiant woman, of course, is going to come to mind. I want you to think of the qualities that she has. Just sit with this person that came to mind and the qualities that she exhibits. I want you to think about everything she encompasses. And here's what I'd actually guess about this woman that you envisioned. My guess is that she's probably not the most conventionally beautiful woman. So, meeting whatever the standard of beauty is at the moment. She might not have the largest follower count or the most expensive wardrobe or even the most objectively striking features. So she might not be the youngest person you know or even the most polished and put together. But for some reason, this woman is the one that you and often everyone else can't quite stop looking at. And if someone asked you why, you'd find yourself probably reaching for words that don't seem to quite sum up the essence of this woman. So you might say something along the lines of, I don't know, there's something about her, or she has this certain quality or essence, or maybe even she has it, whatever it is. And I think that the quality of radiance can be a little difficult to pin down. And I think this difficulty in naming is actually pretty telling, because the thing that we're all responding to when we're trying to sum up a woman who's radiant isn't located in any of the places that we usually try to look to explain and justify why we think someone's magnetic or compelling or powerful in some way. And this is because the source of radiance comes from somewhere entirely separate from all those other aspects that I just mentioned. And that somewhere else is what this whole series is going to be about as we delve into the topic of radiance. So today specifically, I want to nail down what radiance actually is, because this word has definitely been overused to the point of losing most of its meaning. So it shows up in, wellness content, beauty marketing for sure, personal development spaces, and it almost always gets used, I would say, as a slightly elevated synonym for pretty or maybe amazing glowing skin, or even being in a good mood. And I think radiance is truly, at the end of the day, definitely can't be defined solely by any one of those things. Or more precisely, I would say that it's something much more expansive than any one of those details that we're trying to narrow it down to. So it's almost like if you think about how we use the word love as a bit of a ubiquitous term where we apply it to we love coffee, and you love your best friend, and you love Italy. But those are all very different forms of love. I think radiance also can be used a bit overly so. So it's technically within the range of the word, all the above mentioned notes, but it's almost missing everything important about it, especially for us as women who seek to grow and evolve. So here's the definition that I keep coming back to, and this is the one that I have found has held up across every conversation that I've had about this, and every woman that I've observed through this lens. And this is: radiance is what happens when there's no gap between who a woman is on the inside and how she is showing up on the outside. So that's the whole thing. When these two qualities, these two aspects, the internal reality and the external presentation, are the same rather than separate productions running in parallel, if you will, this is when radiance becomes visible. So it's almost like, in that sense, radiance is revealed rather than practiced. But let's think about the opposite for a moment, because I think the opposite is actually a little easier to identify. So think about someone who's performing, and she might be performing, especially for that circumstance, that social environment, quite well. So she, maybe knows how to say the right things, laugh, in the right jokes in the right moments. She's presenting something that by any external measure would be considered polished and appealing. And certainly we all appreciate manners and social graces. And yet this quality that I'm delving into is something a little different than simply having great manners. This is because there's a quality to these interactions with someone like this that is actually a bit managed. So this is the sense that you're encountering a person that she's giving you a version of her that has been prepared and curated and carefully managed and maintained rather than the actual woman she is underneath it. So the performance might actually be pretty sophisticated, but the gap is still there and you feel it, even if you can't explain exactly what you're feeling or why. So once again, radiance is the absence of that gap. So it's not the absence of any particular quality. It's actually not even practicing softness or warmth or confidence, but it's through those things definitely can be present, but it's the absence of the gap itself. So it's the sense of encountering someone who is simply, fully, actually present, whatever presence looks like for her at that specific time or moment. And here's the thing about this quality of presence that I find endlessly interesting from a psychological standpoint. So we as a human species are actually wired to respond to presence, especially in social interactions. So human beings are so very good at detecting what we call incongruent behavior. So it's picking up on the mismatch between what someone is presenting to us and what is actually true for them. And what researchers who study social cognition call this is detection of authenticity. And this evidence actually that I found suggests that we do largely very automatically and below conscious awareness, we're doing these constant kind of complex readings of microexpressions, body language, vocal tone, eye contact and movement, and dozens of other cues where we're processing simultaneously, often without realizing it. We're processing simultaneously, again, the produced version of the person we're interacting with, as well as their internal state. And what researchers have found is when all these cues that we're picking up on, both conscious and subconscious, when they're all pointing towards the same internal reality for the person we're interacting with, something in us, as the receiver of all this information, relaxes. So on the other side, when these cues and data points that we're picking up on, when they're inconsistent, something in us picks up on this, notices, and we never fully feel at peace or relaxed with this individual because we know that something isn't truly authentic or is incongruent. So this is why radiance actually is magnetic in a way, I think, that goes way beyond ordinary attractiveness, whatever the standard of beauty is at the moment. And it's because it's not just about being pleasant to look at, having, standard features. It's genuinely relaxing to be around in a deep physiological sense. So most of us, we're spending significant portions of our social lives basically in a low-grade state of reading and verification. So we're checking whether the person in front of us is who they are presenting themselves to be and whether this interaction is what it appears to be and whether it is safe for us to actually land here, to be present in this moment as well. And an aligned radiant woman is able to short circuit all of that. So there's nothing for the other person to verify the reading that the other individual is doing on their environment keeps returning the same answer from every channel. And this is, she's real. This woman is authentic. And the nervous system of this other individual is able to actually settle as a result. So in current society and life, most of us are actually really starved for this. You know, we all move through our lives surrounded by people who are constantly managing themselves, performing, presenting carefully curated versions of themselves. We all do this, right? Myself included. And we're doing it all back to each other, and it just leads to this sense of being adrift, I think, as a society often. And when we actually encounter someone who isn't doing this, performing at this level, but is actually congruent both internally and externally, this registers something immediately for the people around that individual. So before we go any further, there's a few things that I want to specify that radiance is not, because I think the misconceptions are often, they can be limiting or get in the way for a lot of women, because we all are so different in how we're created. But I have found that radiance is not a mood. So you don't have to constantly be happy to be radiant. You don't have to be always having the best day of your life or a good month or even a good year. So some of the most radiant women I've known actually have been in the middle of what I would define as genuinely difficult life transitions or experiences, navigating grief or uncertainty, really the kind of circumstances that nobody would choose. And yet these women were still radiant because the radiance wasn't contingent on their circumstances. So it was rather, again, about how fully present and genuinely themselves these women were being inside of those circumstances. So they were still able to, in the right environments, be unguarded, be real, practice this absence of a managed version of themselves. And they just showed me that things don't have to be going well for you to still be very authentic and as a result radiant as a woman. It's about the willingness to be actively present and there, whatever that moment looks like. I think also important to note is that radiance is not a personality type. So it's definitely not reserved just for extroverts or for women who are naturally warm, socially adept, or anything with a particular temperament or style of moving, although that definitely can help facilitate radiance. But some of the most radiant women that I've encountered are actually pretty quiet or reserved, withdrawn even. So they don't take up a lot of acoustic space, you could say, in a room. They're not constantly chatting or talking or making themselves heard. But these understated women are often still completely impossible to stop noticing, and there's a quality about them that isn't about the volume of how they talk, how many words they say, or again, social performance. So it's about how they inhabit the space they do take up, and it's being completely there. So quiet and unassuming can be absolutely radiant, and sometimes loud and performing is not radiant too, right? Even though I think we can often assume that the more extroverted personality types are the radiant ones. It definitely takes many different forms. So let's move on to what actually produces radiance, because if it's not about beauty and it's not about a mood or your personality type solely, where does radiance actually come from? And the answer, as far as I can tell after a long time sitting with this question and chatting with a lot of women, is alignment. So this is the convergence of the internal and the external into one coherent thing, rather than two separate productions or two parallel scripts, as I said earlier. So when a woman has done the real work of knowing who she is not performing knowing, she actually truly knows, and then shows up as that person without translation. This is able to be read as her environment as a woman she's just fully present, and that's when her radiance is revealed. So this means that radiance is actually not even something that you do. It's not a technique. It's not even a state that you enter through having the right affirmation or the right outfit or the right energy practice even. But it's actually something that becomes available rather as a byproduct of a particular type of inner work. And this is the inner work of closing the gap of learning who you actually are underneath the managed version. So as I referenced earlier, we all do have a managed version of ourselves to a certain extent that we use when we interact with the world. To close this gap, we need to first ourselves get to know the actual person who is underneath that managed version and be present with that person without that layer of curation that we always apply on top. So trying to perform radiance is certainly the most reliable way actually to prevent it. And this is because performance is exactly the gap that we are describing. So you can't manufacture your way into a state. That is, by definition, the absence of manufacturing. So I want to encourage you that if you've been chasing this quality of radiance that we all desire through external means, so this, could be skincare, styling, developing a certain type of aesthetic, or even the right filters often, I want to encourage you that none of this, although it's not wrong, and it's definitely not worthless or even negative for you to invest in as a woman, the source is actually different. So the source of radiance is internal. And it's through the work of knowing yourself clearly enough and trusting yourself completely enough that the real version of yourself can simply be revealed without the performance. So this does take some work, and it takes time as well, because it's not going to be a one-time check-in of sitting with your state and your internal state, and then all of a sudden you've closed the gap and you're radiant, right? It's an ongoing practice. But I want to share that the work that I'm referring to with that closing the gap, being present with yourself, being empathetic towards yourself, this is a lot of what this whole series is going to be about, and everything that we're going to cover, whether it be embodiment, understanding our self-concept and developing that further, looking at the way radiance intersects with how you live and move through your home and through your day, and build rich relationships with the people around you. All of this is pointing towards the same thing. And this is the closing of that gap and this return to yourself and to the transformation of your own identity. So this is where we're going to be starting and kicking things off. I'm honored to have you join me for the journey, and I'll see you in the next video.